Hi, this is Brian Kim. I want to share with you case number 162 in the best way to do cataract surgery series. This is a 3 to 4 plus stents lens and a fairly small pupil, and you're going to see double chop, cross chop, mechanical fracturing techniques, and how I'm able to very efficiently and easily lift pieces up out of the bag without having to struggle with pulling pieces up. Remember, a lot of people will go after lens pieces with high vacuum, and when you have lens pieces that are dense, they're kind of jagged edges, and it's hard to get purchase in those situations. And so that's why lifting pieces up out of the bag is really the most efficient way to deal with this, especially in small pupils. So I'm holding the eye steady with the cotton tip and helping to center the eye and using corneal marker, which will help me to center Incisor-rhexis. Trying to turn the eye to the left with my cotton tip to get a nice flat approach with my paracentesis incision, first on the right side and then the left side. Using the cotton tip to turn the eye as much as I can, immobilizing the eye and getting that nice flat approach, and that creates a nice corneal shelf which will allow me to achieve a self-sealing incision. This is intracameral lidocaine and then epinephrine, and then some dispersive viscoelastic to coat the corneal endothelium and flatten the anterior capsule. And this is a triplanar corneal incision. I make a vertical groove, place the blade into the deep part of the groove, tunnel through the cornea, turn the eye towards me, and then I enter. Push some more viscoelastic in. Go in sideways, measuring for the rhexis size, puncturing. These are the blunt tip Haldane-Perkar forceps. You can see as I push down, it causes quite a bit of traction on the capsular bag, and this is why I prefer the sharp tip Haldane-Perkar forceps. There's some zonular laxity. Again, no surprise, a dense lens, borderline pupil, all of that does suggest, and it screams kind of weak zonules. Again, don't want to do anything to exacerbate it. Grabbing the right side of the tear, pulling, going around circumferentially. And in this case, the rhexis size kind of matches a pupil size here. Finish off the rhexis, burping some viscoelastic out. And this is the capsular fornix hydrodissection technique. Place the cannula under the rhexis edge, contra-incisionally, get to the fornix, point the tip down, get a nice wave, decompress on the left side, and then hooking the peripheral lens on the right, and the lens begins to spin. Irrigating the surface of the eye, lifting the incision with the chopper, going in with irrigation off to minimize Descemet's trauma. Removing the surface epinuclear material, placing the chopper under the rhexis edge, pushing down so I get over that lens material, rotating the phaco-tip vertically subincisionally, bringing the instruments together, and I'm able to fracture the lens completely in half. You can see that separation, and the lens pieces start to wobble off of each other. You know that means that you've got good separation. I'm placing the chopper underneath the rhexis, pronating my hand, getting it out to the equator, taking and tilting the phaco-tip vertically subincisionally, bringing the instruments together. You can feel that tactile compression force, bring it together, and then that sudden loss of resistance. As I'm cracking, you can see the pieces are definitely separated because they're moving in different directions as I'm cracking. Again, I'm pronating my hand, sliding the chopper under the rhexis edge around the right heminucleus, turning it vertically again, pulling it centrally toward the phaco-tip, which is deeply positioned in the lens, between the lens pieces, and it fractures that lens. You saw that sudden loss of resistance, and I'm cracking, placing the chopper around that first quadrant, again, bring it towards the phaco-tip, crushing that first quadrant into smaller pieces, using some vacuum now to finally start to bring the pieces up. You can see I hardly used any ultrasonic energy with any of those maneuvers. Actually, I didn't use any ultrasonic energy until I started trying to remove the lens pieces. So I'm lifting the pieces up with some vacuum and then sandwiching it with the instruments and then emulsifying the lens pieces. Getting that chopper around the lens piece once again. Again, that's really the key, especially in cases that are showing smaller pupils, being able to hook the peripheral lens. You can use some vacuum as needed if it's fairly loose, but otherwise, if it's stubborn, you really want to go after it with the chopper. Placing the chopper underneath that second quadrant, pulling it centrally toward the phaco-tip. Get a nice chop, lift that piece up with some vacuum, which comes out nicely, and then I'm crushing the lens between the instruments, very carefully crushing the lens. You can feel that density. And that's the nice thing about this technique. You get a true sense of the density of the lens when you do this technique. When you're sculpting and stuff, you don't really have a good idea how dense the lens is. Certainly when you're doing horizontal chop or vertical chop, you'll get some sense. But when you're physically crushing the lens with the instruments, you get the best tactile feeling of how dense the lens is. So I go ahead and turn that second heminucleus in front of me, placing the chopper around the lens, pulling it centrally toward the phakic tip, and then it crushes the lens and bisects it in half. That third quadrant pops up. So I go ahead and place the chopper around it, and then I pull it centrally toward the phakic tip and fracture that piece in half. And then using compression forces to break down that lens piece, and then emulsifying the lens piece. Using some vacuum to lift that fourth quadrant up. It's fairly loose and out. Now go ahead and use compression forces to crush the lens with the instruments into smaller pieces. And then once the pieces are small enough, go ahead and start to emulsify the lens pieces. And whenever you're at the very last pieces, you want to just be very mindful of the capsular bag. Go ahead and remove the epinuclear material, but you have a really nice stable chamber, looks pretty good. Placing that chopper deep just in case. So I take the chopper out, push BSS in, take the phaco tip out, and I go in with the INA handpiece. I always start sub-incisionally, removing the cortex from anterior to posterior, and you get a nice peeling force when you go to anterior to posterior, less likely to have residual wispy cortical remnants when you do it this way. Polishing underneath the rhexis edge of the lens epithelial cells, polishing the posterior capsule as well. Like I said, this is a pretty dense lens. Again, small pupil, but very efficient, very confident. Again, being able to hook that peripheral lens with the chopper, being able to sandwich it on both sides, and that's really the key technique in this situation. Pulsing the BSS into the subincisional capsule fornix, and then cohesive viscoelastic to fill the bag. And then switching to the sweep, polishing underneath the rhexis edge. Since I can't see it very well, I'm mindful of that. I can see a little bit of the edge, but you just want to sweep it and polish the lens epithelial cells. You don't want to really disturb the iris if possible here. And again, you saw that this is a smallish pupil. I had some trouble with puncturing with the rhexis, so I go ahead and widen the incision. And this is a three-piece lens. Again, I like to use three-piece lenses in this situation whenever I feel like there's going to be weak zonules. Have the bevel facing the left, delivering the leading haptic into the bag, nice and flat, delivering the optic, rotating my hand and pronating it as I deliver the optic, and then using the Maltzman at the optic haptic junction, dialing the trailing haptic in. Go in with irrigation off, activate irrigation, go underneath the optic, removing all the viscoelastic from within the bag. By removing the viscoelastic from within the bag, the lens won't pop up out of the bag unintentionally, which can happen in some cases. Let's go ahead and switch to visco mode, and then I'll hydrate my incision. So again, this is a patient with a fairly smallish lens. You saw this is 3 to 4 plus dense lens. I was able to utilize double chop and cross chop mechanical fracturing techniques to disassemble this lens very carefully, very controlled, systematically. And you can feel the tactile sensation of fracturing the lens with your instruments. I mean, what more visceral feeling can you get? And again, it's very gratifying and rewarding. I feel like I have a very good understanding of the lens, having done it this way thousands of times, compared to doing sculpting and other types of techniques. I'm able to get a sense of how deep I'm going. And because I'm using mechanical forces and I'm not using vacuum or ultrasonic energy, which again adds an element of uncertainty because those instruments can cause some serious problems. It's like dealing with a circular saw, you know? I mean, yeah, you can say, well, it's not dangerous as long as you don't go near the saw and handle it right. But nonetheless, it is a sharp instrument and it can cause damage. And so when you apply ultrasonic energy and vacuum, and sometimes inadvertently you'll apply it during the wrong situations, then you can get burned and you can have a problem. So by using double chop, cross chop mechanical fracturing, you'll be able to disassemble the lens very confidently and very easily. Again, placing the chopper around the lens piece, sandwiching the lens piece using compression forces very efficiently. You can break down the lens using less ultrasonic energy, but also being able to hook peripheral lens pieces up out of the bag, never going after pieces with the phaco tip using vacuum. That's really a mistake, especially dealing with these hard lenses because they're jagged edges. You're not going to get good purchase. And so if you try to grab it and grab it, eventually what people do is they buzz into it to get better purchase. And you don't want to buzz lens pieces that are in the bag doing it that way. It just doesn't make sense. It's just risky. And so using the chopper to hook lens pieces up out of the bag is really the most efficient, safe, and the best way, in my opinion, to do cataract surgery. And that's why I like doing surgery this way, in particular for the 3 to 4 plus dense lens and small pupil. So I hope this was helpful to you, and I thank you for your attention.